Good morning, students. So, after the chapter Union Legislature, let us proceed towards the other chapter, the President and Vice President. So, in the Union Legislature, you have studied about the Parliament, its houses, like and the functions of the Speaker, and no other things. Whereas here in the President and Vice President chapter, you are going to study about their qualifications and their importance, their powers, and many things. And for your information, the President and Vice President, they come under the executive role of the government, or the executive role of the constitution. And so in the executive branch of the constitution, the president and vice president had their hierarchical role. As a highest authority of the executive, the president will be functioning, and later comes the vice president, and later the prime minister and his council of ministers. So in this chapter we will study about the president and vice president. Going deeply into the topic of president and vice president, let us now give an overview of structure of government of India, where the executive, legislature, and judicial branches are separated by the constitution. And executive consists of president, vice president, cabinet, and other ministers. Legislature or parliament includes the president, Lok Sabha, and Rajya Sabha, and the judiciary consists of Supreme Court and other courts. So here the executive will take the responsibility of implementing the laws made by the legislature or parliament. So the parliament will make the laws and the executive will implement the laws made by legislature, and the judiciary will solve the problems between the executive and legislature, and also it will take up the protection of constitution as well as the constitutional safeguards provided for citizens. So in this picture you can see the difference between executive, legislative, and judiciary, and their responsibilities and functions. So this is the basic structure of government of India, and in this basic structure under executive we are going to learn about the president in our class. See, under the executive branch of the government, it is not only the president, vice president, the council of ministers work, but also there is another important root level basic fundamental organ or basic fundamental system called bureaucracy. See, bureaucracy is nothing but it is a system of government where there will be people not elected by not elected, but they will be selected through various government exams, and they'll be taken up for working for the government, and they will be separated into various departments, and they were generally known as government officials, and these government officials were together called bureaucrats. These bureaucrats will serve as a very important fundamental executive you know people. So even the president, vice president, council of ministers, and other people, so they all will work at the very high level, and the bureaucrats are the actual people who will work in the implementation of the policies made by government. So they are the, you can call them as the real root level executives. So at the root level the bureaucrats will work as a executives and implement the or executes the policies of the government. Continuation of our discussion about the root level executives called bureaucrats. So they are generally referred as the civil servants. So there is a civil services, for the civil servants are for throughout India, and there are Indian civil services where all India services, central services, and state administrative services. So these executive people will work throughout India in the name of All India Service. They also work for the central government in the name of Central Civil Services, and each state will have their own executive services through state administrative service, and they are selected by different constitutional bodies, and they are elected through competitive exams for the service of the government in the executive branch at the root level. So if you look at the the slide, you can see how all India services have been divided, like central civil service, all India service, and state administrative services. So these are the classifications of the base level or root level executives of India. Before proceeding to understand the president and all, so you might have got definitely a doubt, that is, in USA or America, the president will be very powerful and he will be doing all the major functions of the government. And if you look at India, you may see that the prime minister will be doing lot of works, and he is the very much active functionary in the government. So why do you think there is such a difference between American form of presidentship and Indian form of presidentship? Why do you think prime minister is more powerful in India and president is more powerful in America? So let us discuss that with a basic introduction, and we'll see what kind of system we have adopted, and later we'll proceed what are the the things related to president. See, throughout the world there are two forms of government. One is presidential form of government and the other is parliamentary form of government. By understanding the name itself, presidential form of government, the head of the government will be president and he will be the active person in implementing the policies of the government. And parliamentary form of government, where the parliament plays a major role in the functioning of the government. So these are the two systems of government, and these systems both are meant for good governance in their own ways. And United States, France, and other countries have adopted presidential form of government, where the president is head of the government and he will be the active functionary of the government. And countries like India and England or UK, they have adopted parliamentary form of government, where the parliament will take a major role under the leadership of the prime minister and his council of ministers. So this is a basic introduction to parliamentary and presidential form of government. So in India, as we have discussed earlier, we have adopted parliamentary form of government, where the parliament, which includes, even though president is included in parliament, but the major decision maker is the parliament, which is prime minister and his council of ministers. So India has adopted parliamentary form, and so in India the president is having a very limited. Look at American presidential form of government. There the president will be head of the government as well as the head of the executive. Okay, that means he will be acting as both head of the government. So he will be heading all the decisions not taken by the government, and he will be the decision maker there, and he acts as a head of government. Also, he leads an executive branch that is separate from legislative branch. That means he completely leads, or he completely makes the executive separate from legislature, and he will head this executive branch of the government. And United States, thus the president will be acting as the head of the country as well as the head of the government. So United States of America has adapted this kind of presidential form of government. So if you look at this presidential democracy slide, here you can understand that this is a presidential democracy of United States of America, where the voters or the citizens who have got voting rights in the country, so they will elect the legislature separately, or they vote the legislative branch or the members of legislature separately, and the chief executive, that is the president, will be also elected separately. So in the United States, you might have seen the presidential candidates will be contesting separately, and they will be elected directly by people. So the voters of the country will elect both the legislative members as well as the president candidates. So who is the chief executive of the country. So the voters are elect the members of executive branch separately from legislative branch. Whereas if you compare with India, here our president is not elected directly by people, whereas only the legislative branch like the prime minister and council of ministers, they were elected by people but not the presidential candidate. So if you come to the parliamentary form of government, unlike the presidential form of government, In parliamentary system of government, the parliament plays a very significant role, and the head of the parliament, or the actual head of the real head of the parliamentary system, will be generally prime minister. So in this system, the executive branch gets its legitimacy from the parliament. That means the parliament will try to control the executive branch, even though it is president or vice president or the council of ministers or anything, or the prime minister. The parliament takes the overall control, in running the systems of government. Whereas you take in presidential form of government, the president will be the key functionary to control the government, as well as to to as act as a head of the country. Whereas in parliamentary form of government, the parliament will control the executive. Okay, even the executive will get its power derived from the parliament. So even the president cannot act on his own. He is accountable to the decisions taken by the parliament. So the head of the state is normally different from head of the government. The head of the state in parliamentary system of governance will be president, and the head of the government will be the prime minister. Here state refers to country. So in a parliamentary form of government, the head of the country will be the president, and the head of the government will be the prime minister. Whereas in presidential form of government, both head of the country and head of the government will be president. So this is the basic difference between parliamentary form of government and presidential form of government. So if you look at this slide of parliamentary democracy, here the voters will elect the members of parliament, who will later choose the prime minister, who is the real executive head of the branch. Okay, that means the real executive head of the government is the prime minister, so not the president in India. Whereas in America, you might have observed the voters will elect both the president as well as the legislative members. Here, the legislative members who are elected by people will choose the prime minister, who will be the real head of the executive. So there is difference between real head of the executive and head of the executive. In India, the head of the executive is president, and real head of the executive is the prime minister. And here the legislative branch will always have control over executive, whereas in America the executive branch will function separately from the legislative branch. And here in Indian parliamentary form of democracies, the executive branch will be headed really by prime minister in exercising his powers, whereas there their powers are directly exercised by president. And so this is the parliamentary form of democracy and presidential form of democracies. By now you might have understood what is presidential and parliamentary form of democracies, and among this, why India has adopted parliamentary form of democracies. So because we have been mostly associated with the United Kingdom, and now its policies have been later adapted into our constitution also. And so after knowing this basic idea, so later we'll start understanding what is president in India, what are his nominal roles, other things. After understanding the basic difference between the presidential form of government and the parliamentary form of government, so it is clear to us that India has adopted parliamentary form of governance. So where the real executive head will be prime minister. So today in our lesson, we are going to learn about the head of the state, or the head of the country. Here state refers to country. So as per our constitution, president is the nominal head of the country, or nominal head of the state. The real head is always the parliament, with prime minister and his council of ministers. So let us stick to the topic, president. The president exercises his power either directly by himself or through the officers who are working under him. So all the officers of government and everybody, they are under him, and they have to work under the orders of president. Or as per the constitution, the president exercises his powers directly or through the officers who are subordinate, that means who are lesser than in terms of duties to president. So president exercises power directly or through officers, and he was also referred as the supreme commander of armed forces in India. So in India they have taken up the president as the supreme commander for all the armed forces, like navy, air force, and the regular army and soldiers and all. So all these three wings were under the commandership of president. And according to 42nd amendment of our constitution, the president has to function in advice with the advice of council of ministers. So 42nd amendment in constitution has limited the power of president to a very nominal role, where the president is just a signatory authority, and he has to take the advice of council of ministers, and among the council of ministers he has to take the prime minister's advice, very important. So he will take any decision regarding his executive role based on the advice of the prime minister and his council of ministers. So thus by this also we can understand that the president role is very limited, and he is very much answerable or accountable to the parliament while taking or executing his powers. So after knowing the basic details of the president, let us go for the qualifications for the election of president. So Article 58 in the Constitution explains about the qualifications required for a person to become as a president of India. So the qualifications goes like this: no person shall be eligible for election as president unless he is a citizen of India. That means he must be definitely a citizen of India, and he must have completed the age of 35 years, and he should be qualified for election as member of House of People, that is Lok Sabha. He must have the qualification of a, he is like member of Lok Sabha. He must have had the experience of the member of Lok Sabha, and he also shall not be eligible if he holds any profit office of profit. Okay, here the both qualifications and disqualifications or not qualifications are both are mixed. So here both will study together. That is, he must be a citizen of India. That means if he is not citizen, he is not eligible, and he should complete the age of 35 years, and if he has not completed, then he is not eligible. And he should have been qualified as a member of House of People, Lok Sabha. See, why do you think a president is needed to qualify as member of Lok Sabha? Because unless and until he knows how the upper house or Lok Sabha, which is a major law making organ in the parliament, functions, he does not know his role as president. Because in the law making process, the president has, even though signatory role, he needs to understand the parliamentary procedures. Hence he has been given a qualification known as he should have qualified for election as a member of Lok Sabha or House of People. And if he should not hold any office of profit. If he holds, he is not eligible for that post. And so these are about the qualifications required for the election as President of India.